Okay, as I said, Lluís Foix is our next speaker from La Vanguardia newspaper in Catalonia in Spain, and it's a very well-respected newspaper. Lluís has been with them for an awful long time. He's been a director, writer, author. He's been Washington correspondent, I believe, London correspondent as well. And Lluís is certainly, from what I can see, somebody who very, very much moves with the times. He's now very much involved with the online edition of the newspaper, and he's a blogger too. And we were just talking earlier, I was reading your latest blog showing disapproval for the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Yeah? Read it. Yeah? Great skepticism about Angela Merkel's preference for austerity over boosting European economies. Yeah? But that, right on, says David Gow. Yeah? But that's not what Lluís is going to be talking about now. He's going to be talking about freedom of speech in democratic countries. Lluís, thank you very much for being here today. Yeah?
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. The first time I was in Germany was in August 1961. When, yeah, we were in Hanover. I was 17 years old. And we came hitchhiking from Barcelona to all over Europe. And then the 10th of August, the wall was built. And then we went back quickly to Spain because we didn't know what was about going to happen, you know. And then we went from Germany to Spain, and Franco was still very young. He lived for about 15 years longer. He died in 1975. I mean, I've been in, he said, I've been in London, I've been in Washington, I've been traveling quite a lot all over the world, covering wars, covering summits, elections, conferences. I've been in Africa quite a few times, in Asia, in the Soviet Union, in China. And then I went back to the paper. It was on the executive part of a big newspaper, in the sense that I was the editor-in-chief, and then it was for quite 6 years. I was the editor of the online edition of La Vanguardia, and then right now, I write. I am a columnist. I write in different papers. I have the Syndicate column. I have a blog, and I have to reinvent myself now. And I'm very active in Twitter, you know. But things have changed a lot. And I've seen it. I mean, it's nothing, I'm talking about history, I've seen it. But what I am going to talk about is how the weakness of the written press is threatened by governments and financial institutions. I can say that. I can say that of my country and in many other European countries. And also I'm going to talk about the way the social networks can preserve liberty and at the same time might endanger it. What I would say at the beginning, that there are no clean hands in journalism. I wouldn't say that it's a dirty profession. It's not. But there are no clean hands. Because news and opinions are, are rivers that flow into the great sea of public opinion as they come from the processing centers of information that in recent times have changed in such a way that news can reach the global audience in many different forms. Those of us that have been educated and trained in the Cold War attitudes, I am a Cold War journalist. I mean, the bad, the good, Everything happened in the West was good, and everything happened that was happening in the other side was bad. People like myself, we would never imagine that the profession could be exercised by millions of people all over the world. I never thought that newspapers would lose the hegemony and monopoly of news. That is what is happening right now. Newspapers have lost the hegemony and the monopoly of news. And as you know, the truly important questions of politics and life are the substantive issues. The general trends that journalists only realize once they have occurred. The critical mass of information and opinion is now so large that we know everything, but often do not know the most important thing of a story. So we don't know the story. That happens very often. In the newsrooms of today, as always, but in today, there is a growing tendency to spectacular facts with an exaggerated cult of emotion. Public opinion is very often simplified with the slogans, propaganda, scandalous banner headlines, unexpected events that cause shock, indignation, or admiration in the wider world. The anecdote prevails over the category, and the words spoken into a microphone, which is put off, are more important sometimes than the contents of a great speech. I'm not talking about all journalists, of course, and all sorts of media, but about the impact of news distributed to the open public opinion. This is the big revolution. I'll mention you something. Rarely, very seldom, news critical against to a company is published in a newspaper that gets a big advertising or a sponsoring from that company. We can mention all exceptions we want. There are many exceptions, of course. But the fact is that we practice the journalism of interests and have left behind the journalism as a service to the citizens. The interests may be patriotic, ideological, political, or just business interests, which are the more common that we have to deal with. A former editor of the Sunday Times, I think it was Harold Evans, has written that if the main goal of a newspaper is financial and not journalistic, the newspaper begins its decline and fall. As you begin to destroy the contents of a daily newspaper, there is no chance of success. And that's, I think, in a way, is what is happening in the written press in many places of the world. When the contents are alien to the reader's interests and cease to be a proposal to allow citizens to decide for themselves as a result of the information and opinions that are provided to them, the danger of manipulation is quite high and probably imminent. Montanelli, I used to know him, and I have a few very nice lunches with him, the Italian journalist, said that his real owners were his readers and not the owners of the newspaper in which he happened to write the different ones. A very simple definition of journalism is to tell what happens. But it's not always like that. Some today dare to write with impunity about things that should happen, that they are interested to happen, and not to explain things that really happen. I mean, there's a lot of futurology. The future, you know, we're going, what's happening here? I don't know, but I'm going to explain to my readers what's going to happen. And very often, they're wrong. Quite always. I know quite a number of journalists who say, well, this or that is going to happen, and then it's not happening. And said, well, you said that, you know, no, you know. He says, well, I was, you know, anything.
Well, I keep the story there.
Yeah.
You write it Sunday for Monday.
Yeah.
You feel what's going to happen. It doesn't happen on Sunday, so you write what happened Monday, Tuesday.
You might say that why did it happen? You know. Anyway, Well, there's plenty of half-truths in journalism. Rumors, literary tricks, and deceptions are quite often used as a way of practicing the profession in any of the forms we have available today. In journalism, as in many other fields in life, we need to show that the truth of the matter exists, that the facts exist, can be pursued and found, despite the interpretations that can be done, which are really free. I still think that facts are sacred and opinions are free. Not the other way around, as it seems to happen in some ways of practicing journalism. It seems that opinions are sacred and facts are, no. I think it was Napoleon who said that there are things that should not be written. When news reached him of the capitulation of his armies in a famous battle in the Peninsular War. Almost 2 centuries later, there is news that are never published, or reports that are published partially because they harm the interests of governments, parties, business partners, or owners of the media. This is not only what John Hemmings was telling us, that, because of the laws of the secrets. No, because someone or some of these people decide that this is not going to be published. I think it's Svetantör of the French philosopher and writer, that in some countries, he says, it is possible, if you have enough money, to buy a chain of radio stations, many newspapers and television networks, to say that the owners of these media want to transmit to their readers, listeners or spectators, providing a unique way of thinking. In that case, says Todorov, we are not in a democracy, but in a plutocracy. It is not the people who have the power, but the power lies with the money. And I think we can say that, when the finance minister of Greece the other day, when thousands of people were demonstrating in the square there, the Stigma Square in Athens, he said to the MPs inside the parliament, so we have to vote yes, because the mercados, how would you say in English? The markets, yeah. The markets will approve what we will say. I mean, that's the reason why the Greeks are voting measures that will bring a lot of suffering to them. The markets. We don't know what the markets are. I don't know what are the markets. But the markets are, it's something that it's very familiar to us. The markets. Well, if you look at it, we tend to speak about groups rather than newspapers. This is a very recent event. Groups, a group. There's no newspaper or a radio station, or a television channel, no. Groups, conglomerates. The groups have interests that may be informative, but are often ideological or political, always leading to big or small business. A group has interests. The groups comprise more concepts and perspectives. The audiences are not the more decisive for a group. A group is to own money, to buy new media, to have such a conglomerate that you can earn a lot of money. Under the umbrella of technological advances that provide news and comments live and real time to all corners of the planet, the modern media can become instruments of propaganda to ensure the docility of the people to the point that they can become the victims of systematic lies and half-truths. these perversions occur by definition in dictatorships, but also, we know that in Spain, but also happen in democratic systems, where the task of the press, politics, and economics are intertwined in an unnecessary and dangerous combination. I will not repeat in detail what happened in Britain with the news and power of Rupert Murdoch. This morning and yesterday it was mentioned. I won't go on that. You know, but I think people, journalists, working for News International, they not only were bad journalists, but they committed crimes. They spied on people. They paid the policemen. And then after that, you see the gentleman, he's coming back to London last weekend and putting in the streets a new Sunday, you know. Okay, is that possible? Of course it is possible. Has he the right to do that? Of course he has. But then, who discovered the Murdoch, you know, the things that he did bad? Well, The Guardian, mainly. I mean, The Guardian was very, 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 I mean, I followed The Guardian every day, even because, you know what's going to happen, because he went to a story, the editor of The Guardian said, well, we're going for it, and then he succeeded, because he used the truth. He investigated. He went to the police. He went to the journalists. And then that's, I mean, I'm trying to say that, you know, if you say that in Great Britain the press is corrupted, that's not true. But some of the press is corrupted, as in Spain, as in France, as in many other parts of the world. Well, you know, I never knew why Murdoch, for instance, he went into the Twitter just about 3 weeks ago. And he even explains his view on the independence of Scotland. He says that Alex Salmond is the smartest politician in the British Isles. Well, probably it's true. I don't know, but you know, a person who comes from Australia, goes to New York, has done so many things that we know they were bad practicing, journalism practicing. You know, he says, you know, I would like Scotland to be an independent country, which I might coincide with him. But I wouldn't like that the independence of Scotland would come from the support of Rupert Murdoch. That's the thing. Well, the issue is whether a journalist or a newspaper or a news group may use any means available to get information. The answer is no. We better keep in mind that good journalism and the economic viability often go hand in hand. And, you know, we understand that in Cuba, North Korea, Zimbabwe, Iran, and many countries with authoritarian regimes, the control of information is something that goes along with the nature of the system. But when in our countries, we see that the information and the news is controlled in a very subtle way, then we have to be very aware of that. The most disturbing case was Berlusconi's Italy, you know. It was mentioned here before by Renate. He was both prime minister, the richest man of in the country, and controlling the vast majority of public and private media. He controlled both parliament, the judiciary, and the media, and even the Milan football club, which, I mean, you control everything. If you control all these things, and also you control a great football club, then you control everything. But I think Berlusconi made a very unhappy country. The Italian was very unhappy with him. Even if he was voted for the majority of the Italians, which is something which he never understood. But anyway, I mean, I take Italians very seriously. I mean, they are people very clever and very, but I don't know why they elected Berlusconi, I think 3 times for the majority of votes. I don't understand. Well, I think that the media are often used by governments, judges, companies, major brands, the most varied interests that often are unmentionable. We all know that. I know that. When someone just phoned to you, 10 o'clock in the evening, say, look, you know, I think in all newsrooms there are some labels which are hanging on the walls, saying that what should not be published. They are not, but people think they are, which in a way is more important than if they hang up in the wall. I think it's because of this confusion about what the newspapers are supporting, we could find the weakness of the written press today. The newspapers are no longer profitable. In my country, 3 newspapers have closed down since the beginning of the year, and more are to come. Why? Because the newspaper industry is no longer autonomous, and in many cases the owners look after help in political, economic and financial institutions, just to keep going. Journalists have to add to their own limitations the difficulties of their companies to survive the present crisis, but especially the crisis of the news business. There is a gradual loss of room to maneuver, not only by journalists, but also by the companies who own the newspapers. And then what happens in the newsrooms, there is a lot of fear. People fear. People think twice before they write a delicate story. Why? Because, you know, one of the things that the European Union, I don't know if it's Angela Merkel or who is, so, you know, you have to reform your labor laws so anyone may be sacked in just because the company says, you know, we are going to lose money in the next 2 months. So there is fear in the newsrooms. And this makes that the power the power, the governments, media, the institutions are now very well how to administer fears. And this is, I think, where we are now in Europe. Power of any kind, mostly conservative, because it is conservative, because it could be the other way one, they administer fears. And people fear. Fear of their own job, of their own salary, and then I think they're very, very, very fragile. Well, that makes that a journalist, or in a radio station or television, they have to think before, you know, writing or presenting news, how is this news in the mark of the interests of the company, not of the interests of the readers, but or the audience, but what should the owner think about what they're writing? And that precisely, I think, is a loss of freedom throughout, at least in Spain, but also in France, as we were told before. I don't know Germany as well, but I suppose that something like that may happen. Well, are our times worse than the previous times? I don't think so. But there has been always an intent to silence journalism, more or less with the same agents and interests, always. Well, when we are at war, I mean, I've been covering quite a few wars. I mean, when we are at war, you can't, you have to report on what the authorities say, but you are sure that what they say is not true, even if they are the good ones or the bad ones. I mean, one of the wars I covered was the Falklands War. I was in Buenos Aires. I mean, we had a fellow there in London, and myself was in Buenos Aires. And then, you know, I knew that the people of Argentina were lying. But we wrote that story because, I mean, this is what they say, because we couldn't go to the Falklands because it was 2,000 miles from Buenos Aires. And anyway, and we did what we could. But today, I think there's one of the things I want to finish my lecture in a more optimistic way. I think that the new development is that that news now reach all corners of the world, and news consumption knows no boundaries. Everything is known everywhere by everyone. And that is a big thing. That's a tremendous thing. And that's why internet is so revolutionary. Someone said yesterday that, you know, the blogs won't change Africa. Probably not. But it will help. Probably, I mean, when the executives today, when they reach their office in the morning, they don't look first what the paper said that morning, but what the confidentials, the digital confidentials are saying about them. This is why confidentials, I mean, even if it's not true, I mean, which is bad enough, I think, I'm going to that, you know, but people want to know what that particular confidential says about that particular person, that the newspapers are not going to print, or it's not going to be heard on the radio or seen on television. I think internet is a revolutionary tool. It is more revolutionary than the Gutenberg printing press invention because it reaches more people all over the world and allows everyone to participate individually in the process of making public opinion. The global society has millions of new, or hundreds of thousands of new journalists who have not graduated anywhere but have the opportunity to say, to write what happens and what they see in the streets next to them. Oh, I have a quotation with Walter Lippmann, very well-known journalist, who in 1917 he was working with President Wilson as the chief of propaganda of the war, you know. I mean, he retired. You know, he left the job. But he said something that I think it's very real today. The current crisis, he said, in 1917, current crisis of Western democracy is a crisis of journalism. In many ways, the current crisis is the crisis of journalism. Because we couldn't do better, because we didn't know, because we didn't have the means. Anyway, it's true. I mean, I don't feel guilty of anything. But the crisis of journalism is an important thing about what is happening today. So, why the internet has been so important, and how is so present in society today? Because through the network, we see and read and write what is not written in the newspapers. In a way, you know, freedom has always some way to come through. There's one thing which I don't like of internet, which is anonymity. Anonymity is going to make a lot of harm, because, you know, it introduces you know, someone you have to talk, or you have to write something that you don't know who has written it. And I think that is not positive. Well, what I would finish that, you know, and free journalism is absolutely necessary to respect the well-being of people and to respect their liberty to act as they choose. Vicky was telling about the minority, the Gitanos minority, you know, and those who live in a, what I would say, an unfinished country, like my own country, which is not finished, in the sense we understand the thing, what we are, who we are, you know, we want to be free the way we want to be free. We want to be free not the way the others say that you have to be free. You have to be free like that. Well, you know, the diversity of a country has to be respected. The language, the different languages of a country, they have to be respected. A language, even if it is spoken by, you know, 10,000 people, is a very important part of humanity, of the cultural of civilization, and you have to support that language. Anyway, I have many other things written, but I see that time is over, so thank you very much for listening.
Lluís, do sit down. Yeah. Thank you for your very wise words. Quite dark in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because just one comment from me, that because of the way the media do work in many ways, and because we live in an age of ideology where the ideology of the mercados, the markets that you were talking about, has established itself to such an extent that people who talk like you these days, people who say things like good journalism is threatened by governments and financial institutions, people are very often immediately branded, stamped as radical left-wingers.
Yeah, well,
and chased out of the court of opinion.
I'm doing that quite often. And, you know, if one of you want to be a journalist, you can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that because...
Well, that's a sad reflection of the changing times.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can't do that because I mean, I have a trademark. And then I can do that, and I don't have a salary.
But you have a strong opinion.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, in the sense that, you know, through Twitter today, I discovered that I am more powerful, more influential through Twitter than through my columns. Why is it? Because in Twitter, I say very simple things and very simple truths. And that has changed the profession. You know, there are people, you know, myself, just 6 months ago, or a year ago, when I went to Twitter. I didn't want to, well, you know, did something. And then, you know, I discovered that it's such a wonderful thing. And then the big names in journalism in Spain, everywhere, they all have a Twitter account. Why? Because it's, you know, I don't imagine writing things in a newspaper that I'm saying in 140 characters. That's the way it is. It's that good or not, I don't know, but that's the way it is. And I know that politicians in my country, they follow my Twitters. And probably they never read my articles. Or what I mean, that, you know, when I write an article in my blog, I put a link in the Twitter. I mean, the thing is that people don't go and read your article. I know, you know, because I know, because you know you can look at the statistics. Some articles, which are, you know, some Twitters, which are, people go, and then instead of 2,000, you have 5,000 people reading the article. But what people read is a simple message, which is very bad, not for journalism, but for society. Society, which is becoming a very simple thing, you know, one single opinion, one single message, one single, and that might take us to a political change in the Western societies, very, very, very profound, in the sense that we could become every day, we have the danger of becoming every day, with the possibility of having more populist governments. Governments who listen to Twitter only. They don't read anything. This is a tremendous moment to go into journalism. Why? Because, you know, if someone would ask me, what should I do to become a journalist? I would say, well, use the new technologies in a very, very prudent way, but go and read, write, travel. And then you might be a good journalist, because in the future, a good journalist will not depend on the newspaper or the radio or television who works, but will depend very much on himself or herself. That's my opinion. Well.